Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Live from Coco's Cabinet, coming to you live here on Blast Radio and streaming live on my YouTube channel at Coco's Cabinet. Hello to my YouTube audience and hello to my Blast Radio listeners. It is wonderful to have you here. And to kick things off, I did actually want to acknowledge exactly how wonderful it is to kind of have this show and have this audience. The other night on our sister show here on the network, Promptly, that I co-host with my wife, we had 4 listeners. And we received fan mail and our first tips as a station. And I have to admit, it was really thrilling to have an audience and to interact with people. And on top of that, I was recently featured on the Blast Radio blog as a broadcaster, a highlighted broadcaster, where I was interviewed and I got to talk about how cool it was to have a radio show and how I had a radio show when I was little. I had inherited this cassette recorder. It was a player and a recorder that I had inherited from a family member, and I used to make my own little radio shows. I would record myself talking, and then I would tape some music off the radio or off of the room. I would play something on the TV and record it. Kind of early sampling, some very amateur attempts at sampling. And it was really great, and it was just something that I really enjoyed. And then later I actually got a talk boy, which people of a certain age will remember was featured in Home Alone 2, and Macaulay Culkin's character, Kevin McAllister, had this little handheld tape recorder. It was called a talk boy, and it actually kind of looked like this, like the gnarly hand symbol, and it had a little microphone at the end and a speaker on it, and you could record, and he used it to great effect in the film, of course. He was very creative with his sound editing, as we saw in the first Home Alone film. Takes it to new extremes in Home Alone 2. But I had one of those as well and kind of played around with audio in that way as a kid, and have fumbled around with podcasts. This is, attempt number 7 to 17, I think, somewhere around there, of a kind of a show like this. But it's been really amazing here on Blast Radio and also trying this out with a live YouTube audience as well. Having an audience and seeing that there are people listening and people watching, even if it's not live, they listen later or whatever it is. It's just really cool, and I just wanted to acknowledge how amazing that is and how neat that is for me, and that I hope I never take that for granted, having an audience. So thank you, listeners. Thank you, watchers. Viewers probably is the traditional term, not watchers, but let's go with the 1984 style watchers. That's actually kind of interesting sounding. So I'm going to call my YouTubers my watchers. So again, a truly heartfelt thank you to all of you out there, from the bottom of my heart. So let's kick the show off as we usually do by taking a little trip. Breaking news from around the web. All right, that's right, folks. Breaking news from around the web. So what we are going to be kicking things off with here is the news that Julian Sands, the actor, has been missing for just over a week now. Went on a hike last Friday, I believe, and in California, and it was during some really, really rough weather. Went out on a hike and just didn't come back, and his wife reported him missing, and has been missing ever since. And it's really scary and unfortunate. Julian Sands, if you're unfamiliar, check him out, get familiar. He's a great actor, great performer. One of those actors that you see, and maybe you didn't know his name, but you see him pop up all the time and you're always happy to see him when he does. And I think for genre fans like me and perhaps members of the Coco's Cabinet audience, we might know him best from the film Warlock, which I recently revisited and is just as delightful as it was. The first one's still the superior film. The sequels, they have their highlight moments certainly, but the first one is just solid from top to bottom. Also featuring a young Richard E. Grant, when he was kind of at the height of his powers and the height of his hair, certainly as well. There's a lot of really powerful hair in the film Warlock. But I truly hope that he turns up safe. The longer he's missing, the scarier it gets. But just to sort of acknowledge that he's out there and he's in my thoughts and hopefully our listeners and our viewers' thoughts as well. We're going to check out the audio from the trailer to that wonderful film Warlock from 1989. The trailer here from Warlock.
And suspicion.
You choose to admit your crimes before man and God?
His coming was foretold. Now, he is here.
You know the signs. You are bewitched.
He has the face of an angel.
Channel me a spirit.
The charm of the devil.
Hear me when I say he's evil. Evil absolute.
And the powers of a god. Satan also has one son.
First to have lain eyes upon the new Messiah.
Now, an enemy from his past.
Who appointed you executioner?
And a girl from the present.
You know what he's capable of.
Next time he's gonna kill me.
I'll not let him harm you.
Are the only hope for the future. This is the terrifying adventure that could set the world on fire. Warlock.
All right, as we come back there, once again, that was the audio from the really wonderful film Warlock from 1989, starring the always terrific Julian Sands, who, once again, sadly is currently missing in California. Went for a hike out in some bad weather in apparently a pretty dangerous area to hike. Just dangerous in terms of it takes a skilled hiker to navigate the area that he was hiking in on a good day. And it was during some bad weather. And they apparently had some warnings out that, even skilled hikers should avoid the area. So, the hearts and minds and thoughts and feelings and all that out there, truly, no jokes here. Really do hope he turns up all right. Great actor, and has continued to be a great actor throughout his career from those early 80s or late 80s there rather in Warlock. So let's move on from that fairly grim conversation to another grim area, but at least covered in a humorous way, which is going to be today's topic of choice in our next segment, which is...
Now it's time for... Tales from the Shelf.
That's right, folks. This is Tales from the Shelf, the part of the show where I share a piece of my physical media collection, which I am talking about on the radio. And for my YouTube audience, my watchers, as I am now referring to you, you can see behind me, I am surrounded by my physical media items that bring me such joy. And tonight's Tale from the Shelf is going to be focused on a brand new release of an old film on VHS from the always terrific Lunch Meat VHS, which you can find on Instagram. This is a wonderful independently ran company. They also do wonderful events out at the Mahoning Drive-In, but they always put out these really quality releases of classic films. And the film that they released is called Undertaker and His Pals. And I actually had never seen this movie or even heard of it until I saw this movie at a live recording of our local horror host, Dr. Gangrene's show, Dr. Gangrene's Sanitarium, which I had the good fortune of seeing live and in person, recorded in Nashville. It was around Halloween, and it was a really exciting experience. I got to do that with my buddy Jesse, who owns Danger Zone Video out in Mount Juliet, Tennessee, a wonderful physical media store that also brings you joy and carries lunch meat products as well. And Chauncey, my friend as well, another buddy of mine. So it was great, and it's a real fun movie. It is very much a very kitschy black comedy, but very much in the horror realm. And for my watchers on YouTube, you can see it is playing over here to my left on my CRT in the background, so you can kind of enjoy that playing. And then here is the wonderful cover that they used, the original art package that they received from the promotional materials, and created the art on wonderful cardstock. Feels like the real thing for a movie that's in the public domain, that really is wonderful, and for me is also now attached to that wonderful experience of seeing it with a live audience, with my local horror host, the legendary Dr. Gangrene, who I had the good fortune of interviewing a few years ago. And for those of you who are listening to this as a podcast in the future, for my future listeners, which you guys are existing in a different timeline from me right now, but when you listen to this, if you're listening to this as a podcast, you will find that interview with Dr. Gangrene at the end of this episode as a little bonus. So I have attached that onto the end of this episode as a podcast. And hey, there's an incentive for you if you are listening to this live on Blast Radio or watching me live on YouTube. You can check me out tomorrow on your favorite podcast provider, live from Coco's Cabinet, the podcast, which will have the little bonus of the wonderful interview with Dr. Gangrene that I had the good fortune of conducting just about 2 years ago now. So today's Tale from the Shelf is that wonderful VHS release of Undertaker and His Pals, released by Lunch Meat VHS. You can find your own copy via the link in my Instagram, which I will post this evening at Coco's Cabinet of Curiosities. You can find that in the show notes here on the YouTube video underneath the box where my head appears. And for my Blast Radio listeners, you will check out Twitter at Coco's Cabinet for a link to the Lunch Meat release of Undertaker and His Pals. Highly recommended, lovingly created. The packaging is wonderful, all the way down to the detail of the reflective Lunch Meat stickers at the bottom to make sure you don't remove those, that warning label. So it's truly a delight and a really wonderful film. So please enjoy the trailer for the 1966 horror black comedy kitsch classic, The Undertaker and His Pals.
Did you ever think when the hearse goes by that someday you are going to die?
Ladies and gentlemen, as producer of this film, I would like to make the following statement. This motion picture is a vicious expose of a part of the young generation, that sick generation who must ravage and plunder for their kicks. Scenes of such brutal honesty will be shown on this screen that we strongly recommend that impressionable young people, or those people of any age, who are upset or affected by scalpel slashing, arm twisting, axe hacking motorcycle maniacs, now close their eyes for the remainder of this coming attraction, and further recommend these people do not attend any showing of this film. Thank you.
What kind of work do you do?
What do you think?
You tell me.
Then we'll dunk you slow.
Be quiet, or you'll wake the neighbors.
All right, that is the audio for the trailer for the 1966 film Undertaker and His Pals, the black comedy horror kitsch classic that I had the pleasure of seeing live with Dr. Gangrene, the legendary horror host here from Nashville, Tennessee. For my YouTube watchers, you can see a little sneak peek of it here playing over my shoulder. A little bit over there, that hazy CRT in the background. You can see for my listeners there, you got to enjoy the audio from that trailer. But use those links that I will provide via my social media to check out this release from Lunch Meat VHS. It is truly wonderful, lovingly created, as I said, down to the last detail. An absolutely wonderful release, and one that I highly recommend. And it is a place of love on the shelf, and it was a great tale from the shelf. But it is now time to move on to our next segment, which is Found Sounds. That's right. It is time for Found Sounds. This is the part of the show where I share some audio from a physical media object that is from the cabinet here that you can either see or hopefully just hear, echoing to you live on Blast Radio, or you are watching live on YouTube. You can see it around me here. What I am pulling from tonight, I was able to snag from my wonderful local used and new media store. They have records, they have comic books, they have action figures, they have everything that you could ever want. It is called The Great Escape, and it is located here in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And I was able to check them out just the other day, and I was able to snag the vinyl release of the soundtrack to John Carpenter's Ghosts of Mars. Now, you might be thinking, but Corey, that's not the greatest John Carpenter movie. And you know what? You're right. I will say that the film is certainly not John Carpenter's best movie, but I will absolutely say that it is one of the funnest soundtracks The reason I say that, I think the best way to summarize it is in John Carpenter's own words, which if you're on my YouTube audience, you have this wonderful shot here from the record sleeve of this. I mean, does it get cooler than John Carpenter? If you don't know what John Carpenter looks like for my Blast Radio audience, he is the perpetually old dude with the cool white mustache, always has on cool sunglasses, and it just captures that vibe so perfectly here in this shot. But what he says here, I think, really summarizes why this soundtrack is just really, really special and cool. In essence, the score for Ghosts of Mars is techno-inspired as well as drenched in heavy metal. I mean, what else do you need? John Carpenter plus techno plus heavy metal, drenched in heavy metal. Thank you. Sign me up. I'll take all of that you have. And the good news is, folks, the soundtrack totally delivers. It is really cool. And he recruited Steve Vai, Buckethead, the members of Anthrax. I mean, he just went for it like in every way imaginable. It is super fun. The soundtrack is 1,000 times cooler than the movie. The movie is not as bad. It gets a really bad rap amongst John Carpenter releases, but it is pretty bad, but it's not like the worst, you know. It's no Memoirs of an Invisible Man, okay? So sorry to my Chevy Chase fans, but that is not good. That's not a good movie, and we can talk about that another time in Coco's Cabinet, but not tonight. Tonight we're talking about Ghosts of Mars, specifically the title track of Ghosts of Mars, which is called, of course, Ghosts of Mars. This is recorded featuring Steve Vai on guitar and Buckethead on keys, as well as John Carpenter on keys. This is a super groovy track. It's coming to you live here from the vinyl release that I recently snagged from my local record store, The Great Escape. Live from the vinyl release is Ghosts of Mars, the title track, performed by John Carpenter, featuring Steve Vai and Buckethead on the synthesizer, folks. The synthesizer. right, folks, that was the title track from John Carpenter's Ghosts of Mars soundtrack. So I definitely got a little overexcited there about my buckets, and I'll explain. I knew Buckethead was involved in this soundtrack. Sorry for my watchers there. I had to do a little scooting. But it turns out there is actually another Bucket involved in the soundtrack. Bucket Baker is a drummer, and he was the percussionist on the track that you just heard. So it was Bucket Baker on percussion, Steve Vai on guitar, Buckethead not on that track, but Buckethead is featured on elsewhere on the soundtrack. So if you enjoyed that track, I strongly encourage you to seek out the soundtrack, particularly this wonderful vinyl release that you can pick up at your local record store or via your favorite online retailer. And I highly suggest that you do exactly that. It's a really terrific soundtrack for a movie that isn't super great, but I think because of the movie's bad reputation, the soundtrack also sort of got second string. That's a bad sports reference, and I shouldn't try sports references because they don't come naturally to me, so I apologize for that attempt, so it was a swing and a miss, and I'm sorry, but we're going to move on. We're going to move on to our final segment of the evening, which is always a delight, and this week is especially delightful because our friends Annie and Phil are the stars of Amore on the airwaves. Were in quite a pickle when we last saw them. They were in the Pharaoh's tomb and they were in some danger, and it was a really big cliffhanger. And I'm really excited to check back in with them. So we're going to close out tonight's show by figuring out what's going on with our two favorite daring heroes, Annie and Phil, in another chapter of our radio drama, Amore on the airwaves, another episode of the show Curse of the Pharaoh's Tomb here on Amore on the airwaves. Let's see how they fare. Welcome to tonight's episode of the Curse of the Pharaoh's Tomb here on Amore on the airwaves. Brought to you by Promptly, the prompt-based radio show where husband and wife team Hillary and Corey create competing playlists based around a prompt here on Blast Radio at 7 p.m. Central Time on Thursday nights. When we last left Annie and Phil, they had just entered the Pharaoh's tomb. Excited by the discovery of bountiful riches and precious archaeological artifacts, the pair barely got to celebrate the momentous discovery before they were interrupted by a mysterious figure. Will our two darling heroes survive, or are they about to meet the curse of the Pharaoh's tomb?
Phil, someone's coming.
Don't worry, I'll protect you. Trespassers, how dare ye breach my eternal tomb? He who hath dared to disturb my slumber hath wrought my vengeance upon thee. Annie, did you hear that?
Phil, of course I did, you idiot.
It's the Pharaoh. The curse is real. Intruders beware, lest ye experience the full wrath of my unholy power. My curse is real. Begone! Annie?
Phil, don't be ridiculous. There's no way that's the ghost of a pharaoh. It's a fake. Somebody's just trying to scare us off, and tonight he's gonna find out that girls from Kansas know how to protect themselves.
A shotgun? Where did that even come from? Who are you, Annie?
Get out and face us, Pharaoh. But oh, lest ye beware, I have a shotgun.
Lest ye beware indeed. Will Annie fill the Pharaoh full of lead? Is Phil going to remain perpetually confused for the rest of his life? Where did Annie get that shotgun? Tune in next week to find out these answers and more on the next thrilling chapter of The Curse of the Pharaoh's Tomb, here on Amor on the Airwaves. Wow. What an exciting chapter of Amor on the Airwaves that was. I think that was the most thrilling chapter yet. What is going on with Annie? I thought she had much stronger beliefs about firearm possession, but she was just out there with that shotgun. I can't wait to find out what happens next week with that gun and with that pharaoh. What's going on with the way that pharaoh is speaking? I don't understand why an Egyptian man or ruler of any kind would speak in that sort of way. But perhaps we'll all find out exactly what's going on next week when we hear another chapter of The Curse of the Pharaoh's Tomb there on Amor on the Airwaves. But that was such an exciting chapter. It really was. Well, folks, I want to close the show once again by thanking you, the listeners, the watchers. To be here with you is truly a joy. And I hope I never take it for granted. It's really thrilling to have people that, for whatever reason, want to listen to me talking and watch me creating weird videos. So I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And I hope that you all have a beautiful night, a great Saturday night. And the good news is I am here to help you have a great Saturday night because my YouTube audience, I will be saying goodbye to you. But this is the part where if you've only ever watched me live on YouTube, this is where you are going to go out there and you're going to download the Blast Radio app and you're going to see what all the fuss is about, because I am going to leave you here, leave the cabinet in this capacity, and I am going to switch over to my musical DJ host capacity, and I am going to share some really wonderful Saturday night grooves where it shifts from it's Coco's curated classics or something like that. You know, it's one of those situations where we don't have a title yet for the segment because it's just a thing that happens. You play music, you have fun with it. So for my YouTube audience, get yourself the Blast Radio app because we're about to switch over to the full-on musical. We're going to share some grooves with you. It's going to be fun. It's going to be great. And I want to thank all of you once again for tuning in on Blast Radio, for watching me live on YouTube. It's my great joy to be here with you as a host on this program, live from Coco's Cabinet. Follow me on Twitter at Coco's Cabinet. Follow me on Instagram at Coco's Cabinet of Curiosities. If you're not subscribing to the YouTube channel, if you're liking the videos at Coco's Cabinet, you should do that. It's really cool when that happens as well. So find me on social media for my YouTube audience. This is good night. And I will see you next week here on Live from Coco's Cabinet. For my Blast Radio listeners, hang out for just a minute, and we're going to get back on here with some grooves for your Saturday night. Thanks again, everybody, and have a wonderful, wonderful evening.